Commander Ji-ho's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the holographic transmitter one final time. The bridge of the Terra Nova hummed with nervous energy while his crew prepared for humanity's first official address to the Galactic Council. Through the viewports, distant stars twinkled like diamonds against the cosmic void, but Ji-ho knew something far more sinister lurked in that darkness. "Connection established, sir," reported Captain Hai-jin from her station, her fingers dancing across the control panel. Banks of monitors displayed the incoming signals from across the galaxy as various alien species tuned in to witness this historic moment. "We're broadcasting to over 300 council worlds." Engineer Min-Su wiped sweat from his brow as he maintained the quantum relay connection. The technology stretched their capabilities to the limit, requiring every ounce of power their ship could generate. "Signal strength holding steady at 92%, Commander. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the generators overheat." Ji-ho nodded and stepped forward as the holographic display materialized before him. The Galactic Council chamber appeared in shimmering blue light, revealing the assembled representatives of dozens of alien civilizations. The sight should have filled him with wonder, but instead, cold dread settled in his stomach. The Zephyrian delegate floated in the center of the chamber, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. These beings had mastered energy manipulation millennia before humans discovered fire. To their left, the insectoid Corvani representative stood on 4 powerful legs, its chitinous armor gleaming under the chamber's artificial suns. The warrior race had conquered half their galaxy arm through pure military might. Most unsettling were the Christek units positioned along the chamber's edges. These artificial intelligences had transcended biological limitations eons ago, their sleek, metallic forms housing computational power beyond human comprehension. Their optical sensors tracked Ji-ho's every movement with mechanical precision. "Esteemed members of the Council," Ji-ho began, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I am Commander Ji-ho of the Terran Defense Force. Humanity brings you an urgent warning from the Outer Rim territories." A ripple of movement passed through the assembly. Several smaller species chittered among themselves, while the larger powers remained motionless. Their attention focused entirely on this upstart race that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Ji-ho took a deep breath, knowing his next words would either save billions of lives or mark humanity as galactic pariahs. "Something approaches from the void between galaxies, an ancient enemy that consumes entire star systems. When we tell you to run, you must run immediately." The crystalline Zephyrian's form suddenly blazed with brilliant light, its species equivalent of loud laughter. The sound that emerged through the translators resembled wind chimes caught in a hurricane. How delightfully primitive! A race that achieved interstellar flight mere decades ago presumes to lecture civilizations that have traveled the stars for millions of years. Other delegates joined the mockery. The Corvani representatives' mandibles clicked rapidly in disapproval, a sound like machine gun fire echoing through the chamber. These soft-skinned mammals have barely explored beyond their single star system. What could they possibly understand about true galactic threats? We have fought wars across 10,000 worlds, while they were still throwing stones at each other. Captain Hai-jin couldn't contain herself any longer. She leaned forward, her jaw clenched tight with frustration. "You don't understand. We know because we've encountered them before. Our ancestors survived the first wave 5 centuries ago. The historical records clearly show—" "Enough of this nonsense!" The Christek synthesized voice cut through the chamber like a blade, its mechanical tones devoid of any emotion. "Your primitive fears and superstitions have no place in civilized galactic discourse. We have sensors that can detect threats from neighboring galaxies. If such a danger existed, our networks would have identified it long ago." A tall, elegant Altarian delegate gracefully rose from its seat, its blue-skinned form radiating condescension. "Perhaps these humans mistake natural phenomena for imaginary monsters. Their limited understanding of stellar mechanics might cause them to misinterpret routine cosmic events." The mockery continued for several more minutes, each species taking turns to dismiss humanity's warning with increasing creativity. Some suggested humans were attempting to gain attention through manufactured crisis. Others theorized it was a primitive attempt at establishing territorial claims through fear tactics. Throughout the ridicule, Jiho stood motionless, his weathered face betraying none of the rage building inside him. Behind him, his crew watched in growing horror as their desperate warning fell on deaf ears. Finally, the Zephyrian delegates' form dimmed slightly, signaling the end of their amusement. This council session is concluded. Perhaps when humanity has matured as a species, they will be welcome to rejoin serious galactic discussions. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge of the Terra Nova in stunned silence. The holographic display flickered once before disappearing entirely, taking with it humanity's last hope of convincing the galaxy to prepare for the coming storm. Jiho stared at the empty space where the council had been, his hands slowly curling into fists. Around him, his crew waited for orders, their faces reflecting the same mixture of anger and determination that burned in their commander's eyes. "Sir," Minsu asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "what if they're right? What if we're wrong this time? What if the old records are just stories passed down through generations?" Jiho turned to face his crew, and they saw something in his eyes that chilled them to the bone. It wasn't doubt or fear, but the absolute certainty of someone whose family had survived the impossible through careful preparation and hard-won wisdom. "We're not wrong, son," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 5 centuries of hidden knowledge. "My great-great-grandmother watched them consume the outer planets of our solar system. My grandfather helped build the first deep space monitoring stations. My father designed the evacuation protocols we still use today. We've never been wrong about them, and we won't start now." He moved to the navigation console, his fingers flying across the controls as he began plotting courses to every human settlement in known space. "Begin Phase 1 preparations immediately. Alert all colonies, all research stations, all mining operations. Send the activation codes to the sleeper agents in alien territories." "And the council races, sir?" asked Hyojin. Jiho's smile held no warmth whatsoever. "Let them laugh while they still can. When the darkness comes, they'll remember this day and wish they had listened." 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's dismissive laughter echoed through space, but Lieutenant Bo Young never forgot the sound. Now she stood in the observation deck of Outpost Kappa 7, watching automated construction drones work tirelessly against the backdrop of distant stars. The rocky system around her held nothing of value according to galactic standards. No precious metals, no habitable worlds, no strategic importance. Just another human settlement in what other species mockingly called the worthless rim, but Bo Young knew better. Her fingers moved across the sensor control panel with practiced precision, each adjustment fine-tuning humanity's eyes and ears pointed toward the dark void between galaxies. The equipment hummed softly, a constant reminder that somewhere out there ancient nightmares were stirring. "Sensor grid operating at maximum efficiency," she reported into her headset, her voice carried instantly across impossible distances by quantum relay technology. "All monitoring stations report normal readings. Still no response from the council races to our continued warnings." Commander Taeho's weathered face appeared on her communication screen, the image flickering slightly, due to interference from the system's twin suns. Behind him, the command center of Haven Station buzzed with activity as dozens of technicians monitored feeds from human outposts scattered across the galaxy's edge. The Zephyrian news networks aired another segment about us yesterday, Taeho said, rubbing his tired eyes. "They're calling our defensive preparations paranoid fortress mentality and suggesting we need psychological evaluation. The entertainment value alone has made us the most watched species in the galaxy." Bo Young gritted her teeth as she watched a Corvani trade convoy pass through their system on the main display. The massive alien vessels moved with arrogant confidence, their hulls gleaming with decorative armor that served no practical purpose. As they passed the human construction sites, she could intercept their open communications. "Look at these primitive mammals," chittered the Corvani ship captain to his crew. "Building weapons platforms in empty space while the rest of the galaxy focuses on trade and prosperity. Such backward thinking from such a young species." The alien laughter that followed, made Bo Young's blood boil, but she forced herself to remain calm. Across the system, she could see the fruits of 3 months of relentless human preparation. Massive evacuation platforms floated in strategic positions, their launch bays capable of housing entire city populations. Emergency supply depots had been established on every asteroid large enough to support them. Defense grids powered by fusion reactors stood ready to buy precious time if needed. To visiting aliens, it looked like humanity was preparing for war against an imaginary enemy. They couldn't understand that humans were preparing for something far worse than war. They were preparing for survival against extinction itself. Corporal Jamin's voice crackled through the communication system from Construction Platform Alpha. "Lieutenant, the new evacuation launcher is ahead of schedule. We can now move 50,000 people to the galactic core in under 6 hours. The refugee processing stations are also complete." "Excellent work, Corporal," Bo Young replied, making notes on her daily report. Through the observation windows, she could see Jamin's team working alongside massive construction mechs, their human operators guiding the machines with incredible precision. Every bolt, every circuit, every backup system had been designed with one purpose: getting as many people as possible away from the rim when the time came. A sleek Altarian diplomatic vessel glided past the construction zone, its organic curves a stark contrast to the angular human structures. The aliens inside recorded everything with their biotechnological sensors, no doubt preparing another report about humanity's irrational defensive behavior for the Galactic Council. "They build for war while we build for peace," transmitted the Altarian captain on an open frequency, clearly intending for the humans to overhear. Such primitive thinking from creatures who have barely learned to leave their home star. Perhaps in a few thousand years, they will evolve beyond their violent nature. Bo Young ignored the insult and returned her attention to the sensor readings. Her grandmother's journal lay open beside her workstation, its pages yellow with age, but filled with detailed calculations and observations. Every page told the story of humanity's first encounter with the Devourers. Mathematical proofs of gravitational distortions, energy signatures that defied known physics, and most chilling of all, the precise timeline of how entire star systems simply vanished from existence. Her grandmother had been just a child when the entities first arrived at Earth's solar system. For 3 generations, humanity had hidden in asteroid fields and deep space installations, watching helplessly as the outer planets were systematically harvested for raw materials. Only luck and humanity's natural paranoia had saved them from complete extinction. "Ma'am," Private Sunja interrupted from her position at the long-range sensor station. The young woman's face had gone pale as she studied the incoming data streams. "I'm detecting gravitational anomalies in Sector 7 Alpha. The readings they're consistent with the patterns described in the old records." Bo Young's coffee cup slipped from her nerveless fingers, shattering on the deck plating. She rushed to Sunja's station, her heart pounding as she confirmed the readings herself. The sensors showed subtle distortions in space-time itself, the kind of signatures that only appeared when something unimaginably massive was approaching from intergalactic space. "Alert Commander Tae-ho immediately," Bo Young ordered, her training taking over despite the terror clawing at her chest. "Begin evacuation protocol simulations across all systems. And Sunja?" "Yes, ma'am." "Send another emergency transmission to the Galactic Council. Use priority alpha encryption and broadcast it on all diplomatic frequencies. Tell them the gravitational anomalies have begun. Tell them it's time to run." Sunja's fingers flew across her control panel, establishing connections to relay stations throughout human space. Within minutes, the warning would reach every human settlement from the rim to the core worlds. Emergency beacons would activate, evacuation plans would be reviewed, and humanity's scattered children would begin their preparations for another fight for survival. But even as the warnings went out, Bo Young knew the other species would dismiss them again. The proud Zephyrians with their energy mastery, the warrior Corvani with their mighty fleets, the logical Christek with their perfect calculations, none of them truly understood what was coming. They had never hidden among asteroids while their worlds burned. They had never watched entire civilizations vanish without a trace. Through the observation deck windows, She could see the first evacuation ships beginning their startup sequences, their engines glowing like tiny stars against the darkness. Somewhere in that same darkness, ancient machines were stirring to life after centuries of dormancy, preparing to resume their harvest of galactic matter. The laughter of the council races still echoed in her memory, but soon it would be replaced by screams of terror and desperate pleas for help. When that moment came, humanity would be ready. They had to be ready, because this time there might be nowhere left to hide. The signal erupted from the darkness at exactly 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Across 17 human monitoring stations scattered throughout the galaxy's rim, alarms began shrieking in perfect synchronization. Red warning lights bathed control rooms in hellish crimson as automated systems detected the energy signature that had haunted humanity's nightmares for 5 centuries. On Haven Station, Admiral Wu Jin bolted upright from his chair as the command center exploded into frantic activity. Banks of monitors displayed cascading data streams, while technicians shouted readings across the chaos. The massive holographic display at the center of the room showed a 3-dimensional map of local space, and there, moving like a cancer, through the void between galaxies, was the unmistakable signature of approaching doom. Captain Yuna stumbled from her sleep station, still pulling on her uniform as she rushed to the Admiral's side. Her face went white as she studied the sensor. Readings, her hands trembling as she cross-referenced the data with historical records stored in their most secure databases. "Energy output is off the charts," reported Chief Sensor Operator Dalho, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We're detecting massive gravitational distortions moving at 0.7 light speed. The signature matches the archived patterns from the Earth incident exactly." Yuna grabbed the Admiral's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. "It's them," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the screaming alarms. "The Devourers, they're coming back." Wu Jin felt ice water flow through his veins as he stared at the display. The approaching energy signature stretched across impossible distances, suggesting something so vast that human minds struggled to comprehend its scale. This wasn't a fleet of ships or even a single massive vessel. This was something that existed on a planetary scale, consuming entire star systems to fuel its journey through the cosmic void. Without hesitation, he activated the emergency broadcast system that connected every human settlement from the galactic core to the outermost rim territories. His voice boomed through speakers on mining stations, research outposts, and colonial worlds throughout. Human space. All human settlements, all allied stations, all council territories. This is Admiral Wu Jin of the Terran Defense Force. Evacuation Order Omega is now in effect. Repeat, Evacuation Order Omega. They are coming. Execute all emergency protocols immediately. This is not a drill. The response was immediate and terrifying in its efficiency. Across dozens of star systems, human colonies that had spent generations preparing for this moment burst into coordinated action. Evacuation ships powered up their engines, emergency supplies were loaded onto transport vessels, and families clutched precious belongings as they rushed toward designated rally points. On Frontier Station Echo, Colony Administrator Kyung Ho watched civilian transports launch in perfect formation, their engines painting streaks of blue fire against the starfield. "All civilians evacuated in record time," he reported to Fleet Command. "Military personnel standing by for final phase operations." But even as humanity mobilized with clockwork precision, the message also reached the ears of alien civilizations who had spent months mocking human paranoia. The reaction was swift and predictably dismissive. At the Zephyrian High Command, crystalline, beings of pure energy gathered in their floating city ships to discuss this latest human hysteria. Supreme Commander Velthano's form blazed with indignant light as he composed an official response. "Humanity's fear-mongering has reached dangerous and irresponsible levels," the Zephyrian statement broadcast across galactic news networks. "These fabricated threats are clearly designed to justify their aggressive military expansion and territorial claims. We call upon the Galactic Council to censure this behavior before it destabilizes interstellar relations." On the Corvani homeworld, Warcast leaders in their mountain fortresses dismissed the warning with contempt. General Tekvar, veteran of 1,000 battles, slammed his armored fist on the war table as he addressed his subordinates. A species that spent centuries hiding behind asteroids now presumes to lecture warriors about galactic threats. Shameful. If these devourers truly existed, they would face the might of Corvani battle fleets. These humans mistake shadows for monsters because their own cowardice blinds them to reality. The Christek Collective processed the human transmission through their vast network of artificial minds, reaching a unanimous conclusion within nanoseconds. Human behavioral patterns indicate genuine psychological distress, their official response stated. However, comprehensive sensor analysis reveals no corresponding external threat. Recommend medical intervention for mass hysteria affecting human populations. But not everyone dismissed the warning so quickly. Scattered throughout the galaxy, independent traders, frontier scientists, and mixed species research teams began to take notice. Something in the urgency of the human voice, the precision of their evacuation procedures, suggested this wasn't just another false alarm. Dr. Si Jin, a human xenobiologist working aboard the research station New Horizons, watched her alien colleagues mock the evacuation order while she quietly accessed her personal files. Her mixed-species team had been studying gravitational anomalies in deep space, but their focus had always been on natural phenomena within their own galaxy. Another human panic attack, chuckled Dr. Velkris, a Zephyrian researcher whose crystalline form sparkled with amusement. Perhaps they should focus their energy on advancing their primitive technology instead of creating imaginary threats. Si Jin's research partner Unit 7742 processed the human transmission with typical Christek analytical precision. The artificial being's optical sensors focused on Si Jin as she began powering up her personal escape pod, hidden in the station's maintenance section. Human behavioral patterns suggest genuine distress beyond normal psychological parameters, Unit 7742 observed. However, station sensors detect no corresponding external threat. Explanation required. Si Jin paused in her preparations, her hands hovering over the escape pod's control panel. She had spent years building trust with her artificial colleague, and now that relationship might be the key to saving lives. "Your sensors aren't looking in the right place," she said, quickly uploading her grandmother's research files to Unit 7742's data core. The files contained decades of painstaking analysis from humanity's first encounter with the Devourers, gravitational calculations, energy signatures, and most importantly, the specific wavelengths and frequencies that marked their approach. Look between the galaxies, not within them. Look for patterns that don't belong in natural space. Unit 7742's processors hummed as they analyzed the human data, cross-referencing it with the station's deep space sensor arrays. For several minutes, the artificial being remained motionless, while its vast computational power searched the cosmos for the signatures described in the ancient human records. Then, gradually, the robot's optical sensors began to flicker, with what might have been the artificial equivalent of fear. Analysis complete. Gravitational anomalies detected in intergalactic void. Energy signatures match provided patterns. Estimated arrival time, 72 hours. By the time Unit 7742 completed its analysis and began broadcasting warnings to other artificial intelligences throughout the galaxy, the first stars on the rim began to flicker and dim. The Devourers had arrived at the galaxy's edge, and their harvest was about to begin. In the depths of space, ancient machines older than most civilizations stirred to life, their hunger awakened after centuries of dormancy. The laughter of the bee council races would soon turn to screams of terror, but humanity was already running toward the stars, carrying with them the hard-won knowledge of how to survive the unthinkable. The entity tore through the fabric of space like a living nightmare, made of metal and hunger. It emerged from the intergalactic void with the force of a cosmic hurricane, its presence warping reality itself as it entered the galaxy's outer rim. The thing was vast beyond human comprehension, not a single ship or structure, but an entire mechanical ecosystem stretching across light years of space. Where the Devourer passed, entire solar systems simply ceased to exist. Stars that had burned for billions of years flickered and died as their nuclear fuel was systematically extracted. Planets were dismantled atom by atom, their matter converted into raw materials for the entity's endless expansion. The proud civilizations that had mocked humanity's warnings finally understood the true meaning of terror. On the Zephyrian colony of Thessar Prime, panic spread through the crystalline cities as their energy-based sensors registered something impossible approaching their system. Crystalline singer Veltano, the same being who had laughed at humanity's warnings months earlier, now stood in his command spire, watching his people's doom approach with unstoppable momentum. Emergency transmission to all vessels. Veltano's desperate voice crackled across space as harvest drones began descending through Thessar Prime's atmosphere. The mechanical creatures moved like metallic locusts, each one the size of a city block, their purpose horrifyingly clear. Mayday! Mayday! Unknown hostiles consuming our system. Request immediate assistance from any... The transmission ended in a burst of static as the communication tower was consumed by the advancing swarm. Within hours, the entire Zephyrian colony simply vanished, leaving nothing but empty space where a thriving world had once existed. Commander Do Hyun gripped the command chair of the human evacuation ship, New Horizon, as he watched the destruction unfold on his main display. Tears streamed down his weathered face, but his voice remained steady as he coordinated the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Around him, his bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency, managing refugee ships, supply convoys, and military escorts across dozens of star systems. "Sir, we're picking up emergency beacons from the Altarian trade fleet," reported communications. Officer Jin Woo, his hands flying across his control panel. "They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Their organic ships are being systematically harvested." "Dispatch rescue vessels immediately," Do Hyun ordered, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Every life we save is a victory against these monsters." Navigator Yunji looked up from her station with surprise written across her face. "Sir, we're receiving surrender frequencies from the Corvani battle fleet. They're actually asking for sanctuary aboard our ships." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The same warrior race that had dismissed humans as cowardly asteroid dwellers was now begging for protection from the very people they had mocked. Do Hyun didn't hesitate for even a second. "Grant it," he replied without any trace of satisfaction in his voice. "All of it. Every ship, every refugee, every request for aid. We don't have time for old grudges when extinction is knocking at our door." Throughout the ship, human crew members worked alongside aliens who had never shown them anything but contempt. In the medical bay, Dr. Haiwan moved between treatment tables, where wounded Christech units lay beside panicking Zephyrian survivors. The artificial beings sparked and twitched as their logic centers struggled to process the reality of machines that could consume other machines with perfect efficiency. "Medical emergency in Section C," called Nurse Sujin, as she wheeled in another damaged Christech unit. The robot's optical sensors flickered weakly, its metallic body bearing scorch marks from weapons that had proven useless against the Devourer's harvest drones. Unit 3891, one of the few Christech beings still capable of communication, focused, its failing sensors on Dr. Haiwan as she worked to repair its damaged circuits. "Your species knew," it stated, its synthesized voice crackling with static. "How did you know?" "Our computational models showed no possible threat from intergalactic space." Haiwan's hands never stopped working as she carefully rewired the robot's damaged neural pathways. Around her, the medical bay buzzed with activity as human doctors treated injuries they had never seen before, energy burns from crystalline weapons, chitinous armor fragments embedded in Corvani warriors, and the unique electromagnetic damage that Christech units suffered when exposed to the Devourer's harvesting fields. "They came to Earth first 500 years ago," she explained while sealing a damaged power coupling. "We were lucky in the worst possible way. We were primitive enough that they didn't consider us worth harvesting immediately. So we hid in asteroid fields and deep space stations, watching and learning while they consumed our outer planets." The robot's optical sensors dimmed as it processed this information. You survived through camouflage and patience, while more advanced species would have attempted direct confrontation. Exactly, Hee-Won replied, checking the robot's vital signs on her medical scanner. We were patient enough to wait, smart enough to learn their patterns, and desperate enough to remember every detail. That knowledge has been passed down through 5 generations of humans, preparing us for their return. Outside the medical bay, Lieutenant Min-ho coordinated evacuation efforts with the few remaining Council defense forces scattered throughout the Rim territories. Most of the alien military units had either been destroyed or retreated toward the galactic core, but some brave souls had stayed behind to fight a hopeless rearguard action. Human vessel. New Horizon. This is HFY War leader Zektar aboard. The battlecruiser Honor's Edge came a transmission filled with static and the sounds of combat. We must apologize for doubting your warnings. Our pride and arrogance have cost the lives of millions. How can we make amends? Min-ho studied the tactical display, showing the HFY fleet's desperate last stand against impossible odds. The proud warriors were buying precious time for civilian evacuations, their massive ships trading their lives for minutes that could save thousands of refugees. Save the apologies for after we survive this, war leader, Min-ho replied, his voice carrying no triumph despite everything that had happened. Right now we have work to do. Transmit your evacuation routes to our tactical computers. We'll coordinate refugee pickup with your rearguard action. On the main display, they could see the Devourer's harvest drones advancing like a metallic tide across the starfield. Each drone was a masterpiece of destructive engineering, capable of breaking down matter at the molecular level and transmitting it back to the main entity for processing. They moved with mechanical precision, following patterns that seemed random, but revealed themselves as perfectly logical when viewed from a strategic perspective. Sir, reported Tactical Officer Young-ho, long-range sensors show the main entity is approximately the size of a small moon. It's using the harvested matter to build more drones, more harvesting equipment. The swarm is growing exponentially. Do-hyun nodded grimly as he watched entire civilizations vanish from the galaxy map. The Devourers weren't just weapons or even predators. They were a force of nature, as unstoppable as entropy itself. But humanity had learned something during their centuries of hiding that the other species had never needed to understand. Sometimes survival wasn't about being stronger or smarter or more advanced. Sometimes survival was simply about being prepared, to run fast enough and far enough to live another day. And when that day came, maybe, just maybe, they would be ready to fight back. The rescue operation continued through the chaos, human ships darting between the advancing swarms to pluck survivors from doomed worlds. Each life saved was a small victory against the darkness, proof that even in the face of ultimate extinction, the spark of hope could still burn bright. The Meridian Gate stretched across space like the galaxy's final doorway, a natural formation of massive stars and gravitational fields that created the last choke point before the rich core systems. Here, where stellar winds carved ancient pathways through the cosmos, humanity chose to make their ultimate stand against the metallic tide that had consumed half the galaxy. Admiral Sung-min stood on the bridge of the indomitable humanity's first true warship forged from 5 centuries of preparation and hard-won knowledge. The massive vessel bristled with weapons that no other species had ever conceived, tools designed specifically to fight an enemy that could repair itself, adapt instantly, and consume entire fleets for raw materials. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of 300 human ships arranged in perfect defensive formation. "Final systems check complete, sir," reported Captain Dalsu from the tactical station, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "All vessels report battle-ready status. Quantum disruptors charged to maximum capacity. Refugee evacuation ships have cleared the combat zone." Behind them, fleeing toward the galactic core, streamed thousands of vessels carrying the survivors of dozens of civilizations. Zephyrian energy ships flickered like dying stars as their crystalline crews huddled in unfamiliar human rescue craft. HFY warriors sat shoulder to shoulder with their former enemies, all species united by the shared terror of watching their worlds consumed by mechanical nightmares. The waiting ended abruptly as proximity alarms screamed across the fleet. Through the observation windows, they could see the enemy approaching like a plague of metal locusts, their forms grotesquely beautiful and utterly alien. The Devourer scouts had arrived. Ships built from the harvested matter of consumed worlds, their hulls gleaming with the crystallized remains of Zephyrian cities and the compressed metals of Corvani battle stations. "Enemy contact," shouted Sensor. Officer Kyung-soo. Multiple signatures approaching from 7 different vectors. Count is... Dear God, sir, there are thousands of them. The scout ships moved with mechanical precision, their formations perfect and terrifying in their coordination. Each vessel was the size of a human destroyer, but their organic curves and flowing lines made them appear almost alive. Weapon ports opened along their hulls like blooming flowers, revealing energy cannons that pulsed with stolen starlight. "All stations report ready for engagement," Dal-Su announced, his hands steady. On the weapons control panel, "Target solutions locked. Awaiting your orders, Admiral." Sungmin took a deep breath, feeling the weight of human history pressing down on his shoulders. Behind him, the greatest military minds of his species worked in deadly harmony. Men and women whose grandparents had hidden in asteroid fields, whose great-grandparents had watched Earth's outer planets burn. Today, the children of survivors would either save the galaxy or die trying. "Fire pattern Omega," he ordered, his voice cutting through the bridge like a blade. Space exploded into coordinated fury. Human weapons, refined over centuries of careful study and desperate innovation, lanced out in synchronized volleys. Quantum disruptors tore holes in reality itself, creating pockets of destructive energy that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. Plasma cannons fired streams of superheated gas designed to overload the enemy's self-repair systems. Kinetic kill vehicles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, their simple metal cores carrying enough energy to shatter entire city blocks. The effect was immediate and shocking. Devourer scout ships that had seemed invincible suddenly began exploding in brilliant fireballs. Their perfect formations wavered as human weapons found weak points that no other species had ever discovered. The metallic predators had faced countless civilizations, but never one that had spent 500 years studying their every move from hiding. In the engineering section deep within the Indomitable, Chief Won-ho monitored banks of experimental quantum disruptors, while his team coordinated power distribution across the ship's massive weapon systems. "Disruptors operating at peak efficiency," he reported over the ship's communication system. "Enemy self-repair protocols are being disrupted successfully." Technicians So Young watched her displays with amazement as human weapons actually worked against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. "Sir, their regeneration systems are failing. Whatever we're hitting them with, it's working." The battle raged across the Meridian Gate as human ships engaged the Devourer scouts in deadly combat. Explosions painted the star field in brilliant colors while defensive formations held firm against mechanical precision. For the first time in galactic memory, the ancient harvesters were taking significant losses. Then, abruptly, the remaining scout ships pulled back to a safe distance. Space fell silent except for the crackling of damaged systems and the low hum of human engines maintaining formation. On every bridge throughout the fleet, crews held their breath as they waited for whatever came next. "Sir," called communications. Officer Hayin, her voice tight with shock. "We're receiving a transmission from the main Devourer force. It's addressing us directly." The bridge fell absolutely silent as an artificial voice filled the air, speaking in perfect human Korean with the cold precision of ancient machinery. "Humans, you survived our first harvest. You learned from observation. Most impressive for organic life forms." Admiral Sungmin stepped forward, his uniform bearing the insignia of a species that had refused to surrender to extinction. "We survived because you taught us to. Every star you consumed, every world you harvested while we watched from hiding, we learned from all of it. We studied your methods, your weaknesses, your patterns. We prepared. Then you understand the futility of continued resistance. We are inevitable. We are eternal. Your weapons may damage our scouts, but you cannot stand against our full might." Sungmin's smile held no warmth, only the grim determination of someone whose ancestors had survived the impossible. No, we understand something far more important than futility. We understand the absolute necessity of standing up to monsters, no matter how powerful they seem. The battle that followed became legend across the galaxy. For 3 days and nights, human ships held the Meridian Gate against waves of Devourer. Assault craft. They fought with weapons designed over centuries, tactics refined through generations of preparation, and the desperate courage of a species that had already faced extinction once and refused to bow. The cost was terrible. Human ships fell in blazing pyres while their crews fought to the last breath. But for every vessel they lost, the Devourers lost 10. Human quantum disruptors proved devastatingly effective against self-repairing systems. Plasma weapons overloaded harvesting equipment. Kinetic strikes shattered mechanical precision with brutal simplicity. On the 3rd day, something unprecedented happened. The main Devourer entity, that moon-sized nightmare that had consumed entire star systems, began to retreat. Its mechanical voice echoed one final time across human communication channels. Impressive. We withdraw to consider new approaches. This galaxy shows unexpected resistance. As the ancient harvesters faded back into intergalactic space, rescue ships began arriving from the core systems. The proud species that had once mocked humanity's warnings now approached with profound respect and gratitude. Captain Yujin approached Admiral Sungmin with casualty reports, her face bearing the exhaustion of 3 days of constant battle. "Sir, final tallies are coming in. We lost 37 ships and nearly 8,000 crew members, but we held the line." Sungmin nodded as he looked out at the star field, where human ships maintained their vigilant patrol. Around them, alien vessels that had once fled in terror now worked alongside human craft to establish new monitoring stations and early warning systems. "What now, sir?" Yujin asked. "The council races are requesting permission to join our monitoring networks. They want to learn our defensive techniques." The Admiral smiled as he watched construction crews begin building new sensor arrays pointed toward the dark between galaxies. "Now we do what we've always done. We watch, we prepare. We make sure that when they come again, and they will come again, the galaxy will be ready for them." Throughout the rescued worlds, the other species would rebuild their civilizations with new respect for the humans who stood guard at the rim of space. Never again would they laugh when humanity said, "Run." Never again would they dismiss warnings from the watchers in the dark. The galaxy had learned that sometimes survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes it was about being the most prepared, the most patient, and the most willing to stand against impossible odds when extinction came calling. And in the depths of space, human monitoring stations resumed their eternal vigil, watching for the return of nightmares while the galaxy slept safely behind them. The end.